In Swahili, we say, Haba Riza Azubuhi. Good morning to all of you. I am pleased to be in this beautiful land of natural attractions, the land of the majestic Mount Kilimanjaro. It is also gratifying to be associated with this inspiring mix of champions of democracy, good governance, and the rule of law. I appreciate the honor to deliver the key at this very auspicious drive for Africa's Democracy Conference. Heshima, that's also Swahili for those of you that are. Heshima to the Center for Strategic Litigation. Heshima to the MS Training Center for Development and Cooperation. Heshima to the Institute for Security Studies for creating this wonderful platform. The theme, fighting the democratic backslide through renewed action and solidarity, could not have been more apt and timely. This is definitely a worrying trend that should be of utmost concern to anyone who professes to be a Democrat. And yes, reversing the decline in African democracy has become a preoccupation of many associations, institutions, and like-minded leaders like you are. Let me begin by providing some reflections on how we found ourselves in this conundrum and put in context the journey of democracy in the continent. In the post-independence era, the governance trend in Africa was a one-party system, which was justified by some of the leaders who emerged as the basis of uniting diverse ethno-regional, linguistic, political, and religious groups. The argument was that colonialism destroyed African values, traditions, customs, and its unitary system of governing, which kept African nations together with economically viable societies. While I will not go into the merits and demerits of that claim, allow me to say that after more than 6 decades of independence, we could have done better in managing our affairs. Otherwise, the post-independence public opposition to what had turned out to be authoritarian regimes would not have arisen. But yes, it did. Due to the steady accumulation of discontent over economic hardships and the deepening social divisions along ethno-regional, religious, and class systems. This was compounded by the marginalization of the continent's youth and women, with them being denied their voices, identities, recognitions, and the place they deserve in their societies. They became disenchanted, and their frustrations bred grievances between states and their citizens. Amid the crisis of legitimacy within the African states, a combination of internal and external factors, some noted earlier, created effective pressure for political change, culminating in the introduction of multi-party elections in most African countries in the 90s. This was especially after the structural adjustment policies supported by international financial institutions failed to usher in the much anticipated economic recovery, growth, and prosperity. While all of this was happening on the continent, a democratic revolution was sweeping through the world, shining a light on the protection and promotion of human rights. This light beamed on Africa and provided an impetus to independent and public-serving civil society organizations, which were effective in apprising the citizenry of their fundamental rights and responsibilities, in explaining the role of the government, state institutions, as well as the responsibility of state functionaries. Also, around this time, international partners had started tagging external financial support to good governance in order to further strengthen the demand for transparency and accountability. Since then, democracy, understood as institutionalized, time-bound, and competitive election, along with respect for civil and political liberties, became integral to the agenda of many countries, and until recently, it flourished in much of the African continent. In my country, Sierra Leone, since 1996, unlike in many other African countries, we have had 5 peaceful, free, and credible elections in which opposition parties had won twice. But democracy in Africa should go beyond regular elections. Essentially, it is about good governance, about safeguarding human rights and the rule of law, about giving hope to the citizens through tangible deliverables, particularly on the economy, in access to social infrastructure, services, or in peace consolidation. After all, democratic good governance is a matter of leadership with a vision, compassion, and a commitment to positively impact the lives of the citizenry. And if you are in to serve, you must be strong enough to stay focused and to resist the cheerleaders who will want to declare you as the only person capable of leading the nation. The fact is, democrats and autocrats emerge out of the character of individual. You are elected for a limited time. Your responsibility is to do your best within that time frame. It should never be lost on elected officials that at the end of their tenure, you must step down and walk away in peace and in harmony. Democratic good governance mostly thrives in settings where there is collective approach to leadership, with those leaderships willing to leave their footprints on the sands of time, where there is an intergenerational approach to building a better and a brighter future. I was elected President of the Republic of Sierra Leone in 2007, few years after my predecessor ended our very brutal 11 years of civil war. Throughout those depressing years, I was in the country, even though I had means to have left. So I witnessed firsthand the horrors, the pains, and the devastation brought about by the war. Roads, water, and electricity infrastructure were completely destroyed. Schools, hospitals, and government institutions were similarly comprehensively wrecked. Over 200,000 Sierra Leoneans lost their lives in the war, and 2 to 3 million were internally displaced. In such a situation, everything, including the building of the fragile peace that existed, was a priority. In fact, there was justifiable fear that the country could easily relapse into violence. I was therefore very clear in setting the right tone for the building and consolidation of peace and democracy, knowing that my government did not have the luxury of time, financial resources, nor the human resource to resolve all the problems in 5 years or even 10 years. But I was determined that we could make a substantial progress if we had our priorities right. We therefore developed what we call the Agenda for Change, which we set ourselves 5 priorities with clear deliverables and timelines. Drawing from my 30 years of private sector experience, these ideas could not have been implemented in a chaotic transition. This was the first transition of an opposition to governance. And in the absence of any constitutional provisions on how we should go about a transition, my focus was first on consolidating our hard-won peace. And second, with that, we'll be able to have space to implement our programs. The first step then was to send the right message for a smooth transition and a peaceful consolidation. That is why when my winning was announced, whilst my party people were celebrating the victory, I drove immediately to the then outgoing president and commended him for the manner in which he had handled the country, ran the elections, and invited him to my swearing-in ceremony. The same thing for the vice president who protested against me when I went to his official residence You'll be shocked to know that even the security detail that were assigned to him have disappeared. He was there on his own. So I had to quickly go in and assure him of his security and safety, and instructed the Inspector General to ensure that the security details of the former Vice President were restored. And that gave him a lot of assurance. And I also invited him to the swearing-in ceremony. In our constitution, if you are announced winner by the Electoral Commission, it is the duty of the Chief Justice to swear you in immediately. No time frame, no ceremonies. But I wanted to present the image of a cohesive country. I wanted to consolidate the peace. That was why I visited them and insisted that they should be present during my swearing-in ceremony. And of course, they were there. And also realizing that there were some fears from former government officials, I caused an announcement to be put out immediately that all former ministers, government officials should report to their offices and continue with the business of government until your successor is announced. This was reassuring. And some of the officials who were already fleeing, because we are coming from war, the first change from government to opposition, people were not sure of what will happen with the future of the country. So I had to take these steps to ensure that the right messages are sent. A few hours later, I was sworn in, and in that ceremony was the outgoing president and the vice president who contested with me. This gave assurances to government officials that they will be safe to continue. And so we had a smooth transition. That was the first thing that we achieved as a government. Secondly, in my visits out of the country, the first visit was to the ECOWAS chairman. And in the delegation was the leaders of the opposition. And the current president was a member of that delegation. The current chairman and leader of the ruling party was also a member of the delegation. And many other members of the critical civil society groups were included in that delegation to ensure openness, to send a signal of that we are working together. On the governance side, we reviewed policies, acts, and formulated new ones that provided an enabling environment for women and youths to participate in the government. We adopted the Open Government Initiative, wherein we organized town hall meetings and asked government officials in all the arms of government to participate, and ordinary citizens, even people who cannot speak English, would ask questions. This helped in the formulating government policies and also to have feedback in the implementation of such programs. On the area of corruption, we quickly reviewed the anti-corruption legislation we inherited. And by 2008, we enacted the anti-corruption legislation that is still in place, but which gave autonomy to the Anti-Corruption Commission and also gave them prosecutorial powers so that they can act on their own. And ministers by government, if you are accused of being investigated, you have to stand aside until the end of the investigations. And then when you're found wanting, you face the consequences of the law. And throughout the administration, I made it a point of duty that for inclusiveness, I would always include members of the opposition in my trips abroad. I remember the first visit to the UK, which was an official visit. In one of the meetings we had with the then Chancellor of the Exchequer, I think it was Alistair Darling, I introduced in my delegation a member of the opposition, a leading member of the opposition, and he said, "You travel with a member of the opposition?" We have not yet gotten to that point. So you are ahead of us. Another example is when we went to Benin. Yayi Boni was then the president. And I introduced the leader of the opposition in parliament in my delegation. He was shocked. He wanted to be sure that indeed it was the leader of the opposition. And it was then the Honorable Bernadette Lahai. She came out and spoke to the media. And the president instructed the media, please report this to our people. Because in Benin, the government and the opposition are not in speaking terms. Look at the president from Sierra Leone traveling with the leader of the opposition. So this is something that we can learn from Sierra Leone. So these actions paid off in many ways. First, we had a smooth transition, which had a positive impact on governance and peace. We restored hope and built public trust in the government. We also earned confidence of the international partners and investors. Our rankings improved dramatically in doing business. In fact, in 2010, the World Bank ranked us as among the 10 most reformed countries in the world. We also recorded improvements on the International Monetary Fund, the Mo Ibrahim, Transparency International, and the Freedom House indices. In turn, we attracted considerable financial support and foreign direct investment, which we invested in roads, hospitals, support to the universities, construction of markets, support to farmers with machineries and fertilizers, and also access to finance. Sierra Leone was transformed to a works yard. There was construction in every region, every district, going on simultaneously. We increased public sector conditions of service and the minimum wage bill, and restored pipe-borne water and electricity to many parts of the country, most of which had not seen running water or electricity for over 30 years. Many parts of the country where people spend days to travel were now being accessed within hours. This hard work won the hearts of Sierra Leoneans. which made me to win the elections for a second-term mandate on the first ballot. To a large extent, I maintained the same approach during my second term, to the point that in 2013, the World Bank rated Sierra Leone as the fastest growing economy in Africa. However, that achievement was reversed by the outbreak of the deadly Ebola virus disease in 2014. The drop in the prices of the world markets of commodities such as iron ore, which was the mainstay of the economy, compounded the problem. Nonetheless, the work I did as president gained me considerable popularity, and there were calls for me to run for a third term, which would have meant that I had to change the constitution to hang on to power. I was not confused by those calls, as I knew that I have enjoyed a great privilege and blessing to have led the people for 10 years, and that it was time for me to leave. It is important to note that as a leader, people will provide all sorts of advice, but it is your business to analyze them and make the right decision. Changing a constitution to run for a third term is simply undemocratic and should be discouraged across the continent. Knowing and embracing my limits, we had elections organized, and I graciously handed over power and went home to my town in retirement. But by the time I left, Sierra Leone was rated as the most peaceful country in West Africa and the third most peaceful in Africa by the Global Peace Index. Before that, the then UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon had described Sierra Leone as a storehouse of post-conflict reconstruction and peace. To this day, wherever I go, citizens will show up in large numbers to thank and pray for me. There could be nothing more fulfilling than serving your people well. As you can see, there is very good life after the presidency too. Not only that I am being celebrated by my compatriots, but I also still have these and other international engagements to attend and contribute to. At the same time, I now sleep better. I now spend quality time with my family and friends. I now have plenty of time to play my squash and to go walking and jogging. So to me, I think I still have better days. Unfortunately, the current trend across Africa represents a considerable threat to peace, security, and democracy. Right under our watch, democracy is being hijacked, re-engineered, and represented in ways that the public could no longer recognize it. In effect, once again, the anticipated democratic dividends of a good life through the effective management of national resources, of equal access to such resources, of access to justice, to social services, to participate inclusively in the governance of the state. That democratic dividend, which should guarantee freedom of speech, of association, of assembly, and even the peaceful protest, irrespective of the individual's political, social, religious, or ethnic or regional affiliations, is increasingly being reneged upon by the political class. Africa is experiencing a resurgence of the monster of state capture of not only national institutions, but sadly also of civil society and the media. In other words, rather than building and nurturing strong democratic institutions, as President Obama once implored, we are getting democratic strong men who are married to the ignominy of a third term. Democracy is being overthrown, not necessarily through the barrel of the gun, rather through the ballot box, aided and abated by the very institutions which ought to protect it. Even worse, administrations born out of such democratic coup d'etats have failed to learn from the hazards of the one-party bad governance system. In fact, they have evolved to become squanderers of the democratic dividend. State security apparatus are increasingly being used to harass, intimidate, and detain opposition leaders and their supporters, persecute predecessors and officials of past governments. We are all witnessing parliaments working in cohorts with the executive in some countries to manipulate the constitution and pass laws that are designed to entrench the powers of the executive. At the same time, the judiciary, which is supposed to hold the balance between the opposition, the public, and government, has been instrumentalized to the advantage of the political elite against opposition parties and those with critical views of government. Election management bodies, whose responsibility it is to impartially and fairly conduct free, credible, and widely accepted elections, are instead doing the bidding for ruling parties. The professed fight against corruption is only as potent against the opposition as it is protective of the status quo. These factors have not only discouraged young people on the continent, but they are contributing to the rise in activities of violent extremist groups and violent eruptions between the state and its citizens. Violent extremist groups have thrived in the Sahel and the Lake Chad Basin as a result of the fact that there is a ready-made army of young people disconnected from the state and denied of socio-economic opportunities who are willing to join those groups. In some states, We see the emergence of gangs and cliques, also demonstration of the young people socializing with violence as a means of social expression and their search for recognition. Such reversals of democracy has deepened the public disaffection, while the economic consequences of COVID-19 pandemic, climate change, and now the Russian-Ukraine war have compounded the problem. Apparently, owing to the way they have entrenched themselves, massive civil unrest and military strongmen tend to be the recurring means by which democratic strongmen are removed from power. As Democrats, the ideal situation is that political change should always happen through constitutional means, because violent change of government often results in the loss of innocent lives. It also brings about a wide range of social, political, and economic consequences. But as we have seen, the reality is quite different. West Africa alone recorded 3 military takeovers this year: in Mali, Burkina Faso, and in Guinea. There have also been 2 attempted coups in Niger and Guinea-Bissau. Coups and insurrections have occurred in other parts of Africa, as we have seen in Sudan and Algeria. Even the stubborn, violent insurgents in the Sahel and the Maghreb regions have their roots in factors including the resurgence of bad governance. Freedom House recently reported 50 out of 50 countries in Africa, only 12 could be considered free over the last 15 years, while 7% of the democratic reversal is indeed serious, that it has alerted ever many organizations and groups to the threat it portends for economic growth, peace, security, and stability of our beleaguered continent. That is why we are here to explore in solidarity how we can strengthen the drive for democracy. And from the galaxy of experts, professionals, and professors, and all of you here, I can only be sure that at the end of our 2 days engagement, we will come with answers that will provide a roadmap and the future of democracy in Africa. Be assured that you are not alone. The African Union and its regional economic communities and mechanisms, such as the Economic Community of the West African State, ECOWAS, have even embarked upon a comprehensive review of their governance, peace, and security protocols, with clear deliverables and timelines. The African Peer Review Mechanism and the Coalition of Democratic Association, both affiliates of the AU, are all actively involved in efforts to stem the decline. The new thinking is that monitoring and observation should go beyond elections to include governance, so that where violations are occurring, early warnings could be signaled. Additionally, discussions are ongoing on how to enhance the effectiveness of responses to constitutional violations. I am also involved with other initiatives such as the West African Elders Forum and the Obasanjo Presidential Library, all gearing towards addressing the situation in the ECOWAS region. We must pile this pressure with undiminishing intensity until it becomes extremely untenable for anyone to derail the democratization process in Africa. The good news is that there is still reason to be optimistic. A survey conducted by the Afrobarometer in 30 countries shows that majority of Africans prefer democracy as a political system over and above autocratic ones. But that aspiration could not be realized without the decisive intervention of civil society organizations. And here is the reason. Democracy without a vibrant, independent, and public-centered civil society is like a person with a weak immune system. As a strong and healthy immune system is to the human body, so are CSOs to the democratic state. They play the critical role of ensuring that the system remains healthy and functional. They hold the balance between government and the citizenry, and they should do so by drawing attention of the government to lapses, issues of corruption, and other governance inefficiencies. A listening government should respond by taking remedial actions. But if they don't, the CSO should be strong enough to call out the authorities fairly and in a professional way. As civil societies must endeavor to fully grasp government policies, programs, and projects, so that when they make interventions, they do so from a position of knowledge. Now, this is important because with facts, even the government will find it difficult to disagree with them. At the same time, the public and even the international partners will benefit from their independent insight. That way, they escape the all too familiar accusation that they are working with the opposition or the public, seeing them as an extension of the government. What also cements civil society's credibility is avoiding being seen as agents of regime change. It is a difficult balancing act, but it is doable. Over the years, youth-led movements in countries such as Senegal and Burkina Faso have been very effective in mobilizing their peers and contending with the state on critical issues, thereby fostering change that they want to see. Such examples point to the fact that power is in the hands of the people, and that leaders can only be as powerful as their people perceive them to be. In concluding, I would like to profoundly commend the organizers and for all of you that are here. And I hope this is a moment that we should not miss. This is a moment for Africa. And the future of democracy is in your hands. We hope that at the end of our 2 days deliberations, we will leave here satisfied that we now have a clearly defined roadmap for democracy in Africa. I wish you well in your deliberations. Thank you.
Thank you.